So hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's webinar on the importance of market selection. Debbie and I, we were investigating what's the best way to really unveil investing in multifamily properties. And so we decided we needed to have a webinar series that really just pulled back the curtain on multifamily and shared just the basics of what we go through to find an asset. And as many of you know, because of COVID, a lot of investors have left the office space and they flooded the multifamily and mobile home space. So it's generated more and more of a demand for multifamily assets. And as a result, the price of these assets has went through the roof and made it unaffordable to actually invest in our own market. And that's why the market selection has become so important to both Debbie and I. And we've been trying to follow the migration patterns since COVID has started. And that's why we thought we'd bring you this important topic about selecting a market, because when the market changes, your asset isn't what protects you, but the actual market itself that you're investing in. So with that, we'll advance to the next slide. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jennifer Barner. I got into real estate over 9 years ago with the simple goal of paying and, being able to pay for a utility bill around our home. You see, we have 4 children and they were getting ready to enter college, and we knew we didn't have enough money in our savings after 2008 to afford the escalating costs. And so that's when I was introduced to the Rich Dad program and realized very quickly that if I could use my IRA to purchase rental properties, that was a game changer for us. And it really put us back in the driver's seat of controlling our own finances. So since that time, I have flipped 45 homes and I've transitioned into the multifamily space, where I'm now a general partner and sponsor on 890 doors. We sold an asset back in the fall, so the numbers that you're seeing here are a little bit different, but I've invested in over 2,104 doors. The journey has been amazing. We have now put all of our kids through college debt-free, and I'm now teaching others how to do the same so that they can create financial freedom for themselves. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, my partner, and let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Debbie Conti. I don't have the experience that Jennifer has. I've been in this space almost 2 years, really started to, and my why was, as I was looking at our investments, I'd always worked in corporate America and tried to continue to increase that salary and sock away into my 401k. And started to look and I'm like, that makes me nervous. That's what I have to live on. So really started to research real estate. It's something I've always been really intrigued by, but then started to look at the different types and ultimately landed in multifamily and fell in love with it. So now my goal is to really bring it to other people in corporate America, just like me, who wanted to diversify what they have for their savings, for their retirement, and to leave a legacy with their family, for the family. So welcome, everyone. I go ahead and, okay, what we're going to cover, like Jennifer mentioned, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain on market analysis. We're going to go through all of, what we look at in the market analysis, then show you some of the tools and the resources we have. It's a heck of a list. And then, what we felt it would be better to just walk through examples of what we do and what we look at. So we've got a few examples that we're going to walk through just to show you. And then we're going to hit the Savannah market and really dig deep into that and show you all of what we looked at with the market analysis there. So here we go. Okay. So there is a lot on this slide, but and I'm going to just kind of go through and hit all of these. But what we look at when we're looking at a market, we look at the population. We're looking at growth. We really start with like population growth and migration. Is this a growing area or is it contracting? If it's contracting, then we really need to pause and look at that. So we really look for growth and we kind of look at it from one spot in time to another and just make sure that it's trending in the right direction. The other important thing is we look at and make sure, and I know we talked about this last week, if you were listening and, if you were able to join us last week, is we look for a diverse employment base. We look for, are there many types of employers? Is there any sort of government? Is there healthcare? Is there education? Is there manufacturing? What other kind of industry is there? Because what we want to make sure is that, let's say one of those industries left, that there's other industries that can still support that population and that community. The other thing that we look for is the state or the market we're in landlord friendly? So here, basically what we're looking for is if, let's say, a tenant unfortunately doesn't pay for a year or 2 years, and some areas have that we're able to remove that tenant and get someone in who can actually pay. In some states, it takes longer, and 2 years is a long time to have someone there without paying. So we look at that. Also, very similar to population growth is we look at income growth. Are the incomes in that area growing? Can you see that trend? Can you follow that trend? And then in same vein, what about that job and employment growth? Do you see jobs going to that market? And I know when we get to Savannah later on, we'll talk about that and one of the what's going into that market. So we look at that job and employment growth. Is it growing? We look at median income. Can the income support the current rent, but even more importantly, what we're projecting for rent? Because the worst thing that you want to do is be in an area that can't support the rent that you're projecting. So we look at that. We also look at median house prices. Again, it comes to the affordability. Like if you look at some markets where you're like, wow, that price point for the house is pretty expensive. Not everyone can maybe get into that. They may have to delay moving into their first house. So renting is a good option. So we look at that. We also make sure the unemployment rate is lower than the national average. And we look at that and compare and make sure that it's, in line there. And then this one's an interesting, when you get into this city infrastructure, we kind of really look at, you really have to look around and follow through here and just see what's going on. But first, we want a population of 85,000 and greater, just to really be able to support the renters. You want to make sure it has an established highway system. And then also notice, hey, look at, they're expanding this highway. They're putting in 4 lanes. They're increasing ramps. They're building, doing that sort of stuff. We want to look at that. We look at proximity to big box stores. I mean, is there a Starbucks? Is there a Costco? All of those sorts of things. It does, because if like a Starbucks, a Costco, if they've done all that market research, so that they realize that that's a good area and for that. So pay attention and make sure that there's a lot around there. Is there an airport with one major carrier so that people can come in and out? I think it speaks to like the employment growth and all of that. If you can easily get to a city, there's more likely business transactions and business happening there. And the last one is, and I mentioned this before, is there visible development like that 4-lane highway or a new grocery store or, whatever, just building up of that area around? Do you see those cranes or, all of that sort of stuff? So, and the last item, which is important, is crime. You really want to look to see, okay, and crime will kind of follow some of the other trends. But if you look at that, you really want to make sure it's a decent area where people would want to live and feel safe and that sort of thing. So let me move on to the next. Now here's our list, and this is a lot. But what I want to show here is that we don't just look at like one resource or just say, "Oh, we like this asset, let's buy it." There's a lot that goes into it. So we'll go to all of these sites and just do cross-checking and verifying. It was just to call out a few, and we're going to highlight some tonight. But like Justice Map, where you can really focus in on the income based on that census tract. Just some good stuff. And then comparing all of that, they're very helpful to just help us with stats on growth and the demographics, and if the community's thriving or not. We also look at crime, which we mentioned, like Crime Spot. Look at that and just see what's going on in that area. And the last piece we do rent research is we want to understand what other assets are in the area. What's your competition? So you want to see, like, does this rent that we think that we're going to, project, does it prove out in the community? So we'll look at all of that, look at those competitors, compare what their amenities are versus what's here, what we plan on offering, and compare it to the rent, just to really give us a good idea. So I figure what would be best, though, we figured, Jennifer and I, what would be best is to just kind of go through some examples. So here's one right off the top, and I'll go to the census.gov in a minute. But if you look at the top 10 growth states in 2023, you can find all this information on census.gov. And looking here, you can see all of the states, which are probably not surprising to everyone. You can see a lot of that Southeast, Texas, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado as well. But let me go and just show you what we do, and let me know if you can see it. So here's that article where we're able to provide that and pull that information. And this is where you're starting at like the 30,000 feet level and just looking. But if you can read through this article, it gives a lot of great information. But then down in here, here's that table I was just showing. And you can see there's our states again, and then the actual numeric growth. And that's where we got that information from. But even more interesting on census.gov, let me go here. I want to show you in my backyard, and I want to pull up Cincinnati, Ohio, and just show you what we can see on census.gov. And it may take a little bit, but this gives you an idea of what we really do and what we really look at. So it's going to take a second here because it's retrieving information. Turn that off. Maybe it'll come up.
Got a lot of great data.
It does, but I think, I wonder, watch my internet. Yeah, just. There we go. Well, the suspense, it took a little bit here. But wanted to show, here's what you can see in Cincinnati, and it just starts to give you some information. And this is obviously Cincinnati proper, but you can see the population of 309,000. It gives you your median household income. You can see degrees and the employment rate, the number of housing units. It just gives you a good jump off of information. But then what I want to show you is also in my backyard, but it's a submarket of Cincinnati. So let me go here just to show you the importance of looking. We started out at the market level, but now we're going to go to a submarket and just see, just the market alone is not something you can't just look at that. You actually need to get into this submarket as well. So let's see, that was a little bit quicker. Okay. So population, which makes sense, it's a suburb of Cincinnati. There's about 35,000 residents. If you compare that, the median household income is a little bit higher here in Mason as opposed to Cincinnati proper. So, but that's a good thing to know that you really need to focus on that submarket as well. Again, you can look at the employment rate, the housing units, and just go through all of that. So wanted to share that, and that's just the beginning of census.gov and what it can show you. But just wanted to call that out and show that to you. Let me advance to the next slide. Okay. So this is Justice Map. And also, again, going to focus on my backyard. But what it goes to show, and we'll kind of talk through it. We were just looking at census numbers, but now what we're going to do is look at income. And in Justice Map, you can actually go and search down to a census tract. And what's interesting on that is you can go and find, okay, where is this asset? And then what's surrounding that asset as well. So for example, I just pulled up again in that Mason area. It's showing in this census tract of 85,800. But if you also notice, there's a lot of different colors and darker blue through here, which would be higher median income. And then on the flip side, the converse, down here, this is also in Cincinnati, and actually looked at it and asked it. Someone had brought something to me and said, hey, what do you think about this? My first thought was I came here and said, okay, it's here in this red, which that the median income is 29,600. And if you notice around there, there's a lot of red in that same lower income. So I know, Jennifer, we were going to look at a quick example. Let's say we're assuming, can we charge, $1,000 in rent? What makes sense based on these numbers? So I know you're going to help me do the magic with the numbers.
Yeah, so let's take the top metric first, using your own county. So if we took 85,814 and let's divide that by 12 months out of the year, this individual, or on average, people are making $7,151 a month. Now, if we go by the guideline that a third of your income should go towards your rent or your mortgage, we divide that by 3. The median income here can support a payment of $2,383,000. So if the asset we're trying to purchase is charging $1,500 and we want to take it to $1,800, that will comfortably support that number. Now let's go to the bottom, 29,654 divided by 12 months. And then that's $2,471 a month, and you divide that by 3. The people living in this area can only afford $823 to comfortably stay in that guideline that says a third of your income should go towards your rent or mortgage. So if we're considering an asset in that red area and thinking we're going to add value to the asset, we're going to bump the rent all the way up to $1,500, you're not going to be able to sustain that asset. There's not enough people in that demographic that can afford that. So that's really important. In fact, I had an asset that was brought to me just like Debbie, and I said, there's just no way we're going to be able to do the business plan that we've outlined for this asset because of the submarket. So this tool right here is just so critical, and it's been a wonderful tool that we didn't used to have. So we're really fortunate to have it now.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it's very helpful. It really just helps right out of the gate to look and say, ooh, what's going on here? Can it support that income? So just wanted to share that. And then just, again, it goes just to highlight, it's looking at that submarket. These are two different markets in Cincinnati. It just shows you, we really need to pay attention, not to just Cincinnati as a whole. You do need to start there, but really do this comparison and drill down. So, okay. Then also just the last example to walk through, and I wanted to give this, is citydata.com. What is interesting about this, and just to walk through, is, again, if you remember, I said that there was about 35,000 people. This is also Mason, just to say this again, 35,000 residents. That ties to what we were looking at in the census.gov. So again, we're just trying to get many data points and make sure that what we're seeing is verified, makes sense, is logical. Again, that median household income. Interesting though, here, if you notice, it's showing it's 122,000. And that census tract we were looking at was like 86. But if you remember, all around that census tract, there was a lot darker blue. And if you were to go and look at those different census tracts, 135,000, higher numbers, which I think if you take the entire city as a whole, that number seems reasonable. I would check that out and validate it more, but that seems reasonable. Also of interest is that median home price, right there right here in this area of 413,000. We look at that because you want to see, okay, if that's what people have to, that's a median house price, are people going to have to rent maybe a little bit longer? And what is the median rent? And if you notice down here, it's 1,666. How does that compare to buying a house in this market? Does it make sense? Is renting maybe a more affordable option for folks? So again, here, I think what I'd like to convey is that we will do this not just with these 3 examples, but we'll take it and do that with all of these different, tons of different things, just to look at that and see where we are. Okay. So
Yeah, so I'm going to take it over from here. And we've all heard the phrase location, location, location. And the reason why that's so important, as I mentioned earlier, is it protects you in a down market. And we were recently brought an asset that we began underwriting in Savannah, Georgia. So we thought, what a better time to share with you what we are going through, because again, we're out-of-state buyers. And just like all of you, we want to make sure that we're comfortable moving forward on an asset that isn't in our own backyard. So with that, we're going to put this market to the same test we would for our own backyard.
mm-hmm.
So the first thing we're going to do is look at what are other people saying about the Savannah, Georgia area. And so on the left-hand side, these are all different accolades that the city has received, and rather go through the entire list. I'm just going to point out a couple. It says it's the South's best city for Southern living. It looks like it's one of the best beach towns. That's number 3. Number 1 is the best places to live and work as a movie maker. I know they have a college there that helps people specialize in making movies. It's the number 4 top US city, claims Travel and Leisure. So it's important to look at this and see, okay, what are people saying about the city? And also, is it a place that you would want to go and visit? That's another piece to buying a property that's not in your backyard. Is, do you feel comfortable traveling to this location? Is it a desirable place for you to go? And then on the right-hand side here, the unemployment rate, you can see the population. It meets our metrics of being over 85,000. So that's great. And then the unemployment rate is, we want to compare it to the US average. So the US average is sitting at 3.7. And you can see here that it's lower than the US average. So that's great. If the cost of living for the US is 100%, this is showing that this is a more affordable city to live in based on that 83% number. And then if you're looking at the phase of growth, it's in an expansion phase per Moody's cycle phase. And then, like Debbie said earlier, we want to make sure we're investing in areas that have a diverse industry for our renters that are living there. So you can see here the key industries are logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, and education. And then the areas that are really taking off in the growth sectors are tourism, which is, again, no surprise. It's a southern-based city. You've got the hospitality, you've got film and TV production, and then transportation. And that's because there's a big port city there. And they're also building a huge Hyundai plant. In fact, it's the biggest plant in the Georgia area in its history. So that's a really exciting thing that's happening in the Savannah area. So as you can see here, we want to make sure that we're investing in cities that are growing in population. And this obviously that's exactly what's happening here. Now, this was pulled out of a CoStar report. And CoStar is a company that contains all the data about every single apartment across the US. And instead of using a realtor to find properties, we use commercial brokers to actually find data for us. And a lot of times when a broker brings us a property, it contains a whole slew of information on the actual city itself, and then it goes into the submarket, and then it compares your asset that you're considering to every other asset in the general area that it resides. So you can see here, Savannah is having explosive growth. It is attracting 60,000 people a day from tourism. It's got 116,000 new residents that are projected to move there between 2015 and 2030. And some of the major drivers, again, are the port. It's also an industry leader for aerospace. And you've got a US headquarters there that provides $5 billion in revenue to that area. And as I mentioned, and I'm not sure, yeah, in the top left corner, it talks about the Hyundai EV plant that's bringing 8,000 new jobs to the area. So it's huge. It's all that anybody talks about when you go to Savannah. And again, just supporting the diversity of employers. It's not just a one-horse town. It has manufacturing, healthcare, government, military, logistics, and education. So the job growth for 2023 for Georgia at large is 3.2%. But Savannah is actually outpacing the state, and it's going to grow by 4.5%, which is really exciting. And then the last piece here is you want to make sure you understand how many new units are being built in the Savannah area, and then what's happening across the demographic there, or the Southeast region. So one of the things that was a highlight here is that Savannah, Georgia is actually projected to grow faster than any other city on this list. And I know that by looking across row 1 in the top right corner there, where it says 5-year projected rent growth. It's sitting at 3.8%. Now, if I go back to the far left, going down the columns, it says that they currently have 31,000 units. And the next column is the number of units that are under construction. So they've got 2,617 units under construction. The percentage that are under construction is 8.4% of that number. The number that have been delivered to date are 2,556. The amount that have been absorbed into the area, meaning they've been leased up, is 1,229. The average market rent is 1,586. And the occupancy, based on all these new units coming online, is sitting at 94%. So you want to see something that's greater than 90%. If it's below that, that means they're bringing on too many new units, and the town itself or the submarket cannot support the growth that is occurring in that submarket or that actual city. So that's a really great sign that Savannah is actually able to absorb all these brand new units. And another great saying is we make our money when we buy. They probably say this in single family as well. And the reason why we say that is if you do your due diligence, you run your numbers properly, it's a way that you can ensure your strategy is going to play out, and you're going to be able to implement a business plan that makes your investors money. So now what we want to do is go back and utilize the same resources to make sure we verify that the metrics that we set out before you at the beginning of the presentation, actually that the Savannah, Georgia market is actually going to meet those. So let's go back, Debbie, now to Justice Map and
Yep.
the Savannah market.
Okay. And
Yeah, so here we are.
let me know where you want me to drive for you.
Yeah, so let's look at the Savannah area first.
Okay.
So you can barely see it there. It's in the left.
Right
Yeah,
here.
there you are.
Yep.
And see, again, all that red. And if you look at the lower left box, it's saying a lot of that red is going to be between 0 to 43,000 in median income. And
Mhm.
so, we're probably not going to get the rent bumps that we need to support the rent that we're trying to get for the asset. So the asset we're actually considering is in Whitmarsh, and it's spelled Whitemarsh, but they pronounce it Whitmarsh Island. And if we select that, you can see that the average income for that area is $77,778. So again, using my calculator, I'm going to put in $77,778 divided by 12 months. So the average person in this area is bringing home $64.81 a month. Divide that by 3, following the guidelines that they set forth on living at your appropriate level for rent and mortgage. And that would be, this family could support up to a $2,160 rent. Now, the asset that we're looking at is currently at $1,500. So we can go all the way up to $2,100, and these people would still be able to comfortably stay within their threshold of $2,160. So that is a great upside to this asset that we're considering.
Mhm.
Okay, so now let's go over to one of the other tools that you showed us.
Let me see if I pick the right one. Watch me not pick the right one. Here's Savannah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So over on the right-hand side, Savannah, Georgia has a population of 147,780. The median household here, again, if you looked at what we saw earlier, is 53,258. So that's right in line with where that chart was if we selected on downtown Savannah. And then let's go over now to the other slide that
Mhm.
shows us Whitmarsh.
Okay. And I cannot see that right now. Let me see. No. Okay. It's behind this little share thing. Ah,
No, you're fine.
there we go.
This is part of doing due diligence, right?
That's
Here it
exactly.
is.
Yep, here we
There it
go.
is. Yeah.
There.
So we tried to speed this up as much as we could to protect your time. But just so you know, it's a pretty arduous process to do our own due diligence before we actually decide to move forward on an asset. So here you can see Whitmarsh Island. The total population for this submarket is 6,983. The median household income is 89,000. So that's a little bit different. Now, the thing I looked at is what was the source? And this was actually taken in 2022. If you go back to Justice Map, that was actually taken in 2020. So if we go from 77,000 in 2020, this area now is bringing in a median household income of 89,000 in 2 years. That shows you the amount of growth and wage increase that that small Dimock submarket has had. That's huge for that area. So now let's take those numbers. Let's take 89,710, divide that by 12. That's 74.75 for the month. Divide that by 3. This particular submarket can now support a rent of $2,491. That's a huge increase over where the asset currently sits, which is at $1,500. You could almost increase it by $1,000. Now, somebody wouldn't want to go in there and do that immediately. You'll lose half of the building overnight. So there's a strategic way to do that. And that's where we go in and we implement a strategic business plan that outlines how much we're going to grow it. So it feels natural. It doesn't feel like we're trying to exclude everybody in the building. But we'd be very methodical about that process. Okay, is there another slide that we can show
There-
them?
Yes, it is that city data for Whitmarsh.
Okay, yeah. So again, we just want to verify and cross-verify the data that we're seeing. So you can see here in the middle of the slide, the estimated median household income is 86,000. And that was in 2022. So we're really close to the number I just ran in the computer, or excuse me, in the calculator. So I feel good about the data we're looking at. And then the estimated median household house costs 362,000. But if you go down a little bit, the mean price, all housing units is 552. So that's a pretty that's going to be a big challenge for people that are trying to get into a home to reach out of the gate. That's pretty expensive. So I think you're going to see a lot more people staying in apartments a lot longer. And I know that that's what we're seeing in my own hometown of Kansas City. And I'm sure you're seeing that across the nation. It's just become more and more expensive to live no matter where you live. So with that, let's go back and let's look at our checklist one more time.
Okay, and of course it took me out.
That's all right. We can
Me
go.
get back. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
I knew
So
we had to pick up. There we
there
go.
you go.
Mhm.
So what we usually do is once we go through all of the different sources, we then go back here and we say, okay, did it meet our population growth? So is it at 85,000 or greater? Yes, it is. Is there a trend for migration? And we saw that. And we certainly saw that in income growth. We saw a diversity of employers. I looked it up. I verified that Georgia is landlord friendly. And again, it makes it very easy to evict somebody that becomes a squatter. And that is really critical when you own a property and you have to make a mortgage payment. So that's important. Again, we saw the income growth just in the last 2 years. It's grown by 13,000 or 12,000. That's pretty significant. The median income, we talked about all these things. The median house price, we looked that up. We looked at the unemployment rate. It is below the US average, which is what you want. And I can tell you that every city you look at is not going to pass this litmus test. Savannah, Georgia is an anomaly. Like the top cities that are all growing, those will all probably pass this test. Probably 100% of them will. It's the ones that are in tertiary markets that are declining. And so there's a lot, we pass on a lot of assets. I personally looked at 250 assets before I ever found one that met my criteria. And it took me 3 years to find it. So it takes a lot of perseverance. but when you find it, it's a great thing. And so we've partnered with a team that is really good at finding these assets in the Southeast corridor. And the last piece on this that I don't want to take away from is the crime. We didn't look at the crime in this particular area. So do we have the ability to go back and
Yep.
look at the crime?
Yep, let me go back. Which I think, yeah, we didn't get into. So this is actually crime, spot crime, which I did pull it up for Whitmarsh.
Yeah, and if you'll notice this, this is a really fun tool, and I would encourage all of you to do this in your own backyard. Go to spotcrime.com, look at your own neighborhood. You will
Yes.
be blown away at what you find. But this is pretty typical. In lower income areas, you will see a lot more violence, and in the higher income areas, less violence. Now, while you do see the property at large here is the Bullseye right by White Marsh Island, you do see two other bullseyes that are close in proximity. And the reality is crime happens everywhere. It doesn't matter where you live, and it's not exclusive to any particular demographic. It happens everywhere, but you limit your exposure a little bit depending on the income and where you're at. So this is just to show you that we're
Mhm.
in a safe area, and I feel really good about it. That's going to limit our exposure to a lot of crimes and concerns that you might have when you own a property that's in another state that you can't get to quickly. So with that, let's go back to our market criteria here.
Yep. And of course it took out again. I need to figure out how to do that.
That's all right.
There we go.
So the last slide is really just to show you that,
Oh,
that property, it meets all of our criteria. And so we're really excited about this opportunity in Savannah, Georgia. We are working through the purchase sale agreement now with the actual seller. And we hope to have this to you here in the next 2 weeks to show you. But part of our series is really to show you again, pull back the curtain and show you what we go through before we ever bring a property to you. Because we, again, are investors first, and we want to make sure that we are as conservative as possible when we choose the assets that we want to move forward with. And with that, let's look at the topics that we plan to bring you here in the next few weeks. So we'll do another real life case study, and then we'll show you the underwriting, the projected returns, exactly what we found on our due diligence. And what we'll probably do next week, though, is we'll show you what the due diligence looks like. So once we get a property under contract, we'll walk you through that process and how we actually go and visit the property and what that looks like and what we're looking for. And then once we get it under contract and we close on it, what asset management looks like. So those are some of the upcoming topics in the next few weeks. And if there's something that you would like us to cover that isn't on this list, please reach out to Debbie or myself. We would love to address those. And we again want to thank you all for being here this evening. We know you could be anywhere on a Thursday night,